Oh, the weather outside is frightful. Do 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 do. Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. I guess I'm kind of in the festive mood. I don't know. I'm wearing green. I'm not doing Vlogmas, but I thought maybe if I just added a sprinkle or something, somebody would appreciate it. Hey y'all, it's Ashley Bookishrealm. Welcome back to another video. As you can see from the title of this video, we are here to talk about what the heck I read in November. So this is not going to be fancy schmancy, a whole lot going on here. I usually do stats and stuff, but life, parenting, job. It's a lot. It's a lot. It's a whole lot. So we're just gonna rock and roll and go with it, and I'm gonna give you my best and most disappointing books of November. But before we get started, I would like to thank today's sponsor of this video, and that is a Book of the Month. So if you didn't know, which I'm sure you already know, but Book of the Month is a super popular, fast-growing online book service. So their mission is to help promote new and emerging authors and to help readers discover books that they're gonna love. So the way that it works is that the Book of the Month team spends so much time vetting through hundreds of books to come up with a specially curated list of books for us to choose from. And some of these titles are new releases or even early releases. So yes, in fact, we do get the opportunity sometimes to read books before they are technically released on general public shelves. One of the great things about this curated list is that it gives us the opportunity to spend more time reading and less time researching, which, listen, if there's anyone who understands what it means to be strapped for time, I promise you it is me. I'm strapped for time all the time. Always. That's me. I'm her. Strapped time. So Book of the Month is risk-free. So if there's ever a month that you just don't want to read the books that they have selected, you can skip and you won't be charged for that month, which I think is pretty awesome, especially, listen, this economy. This economy is something else. It is something else. So that is a great option. What's really cool is that for the month of December, Book of the Month is running this special deal where first-time individuals can join for $5. I mean, y'all, you really can't beat that. $5 when newly released hardcovers are just astronomical, especially when we're talking about adult titles. I mean, we're talking anywhere from like $25 up. So the fact that you can join, if you're a first-time person looking to get into Book of the Month, you can use my code Bookishrealm, and it's $5 for the month of December. $5. That's it. All right, y'all. So let's go ahead and jump in and talk a little bit about the selections for the month of December. So every month your books will come in this blue Book of the Month box. Now the December books include 5 different selections, including Kiss Her Once for Me, The Circus Train, All the Dangerous Things, The Light Pirate, and also Babel, or The Necessity of Violence. So the 2 books that I ended up going with this month are Kiss Her Once for Me and then The Circus Train. So Kiss Her Once for Me is, I think, perfect for the holiday season. It gives those winter cozy vibes, and it follows a main character who essentially had everything going for her. She had a great job, she met someone and they kind of fell in love in a single night, and then things just kind of take a turn for the worse, where her and this person, they have a falling out, and there's some deceit that happens, and then she ends up losing her job. So she ends up getting a job at another job at a coffee shop, and the landlord of that area is basically proposing that they do a marriage of convenience. That way he can get his inheritance and all of her financial issues will be taken care of. Well, when he ends up taking her home, and I believe it's for the holidays, they run into an issue when they realize that his sister is actually the woman that she had fallen for originally. So I love a good messy story, and this sounds like a hot mess, and this is why I went for it. I was like, this sounds like a hot mess is something that I would definitely enjoy. And the next one, of course, that I said I picked out was The Circus Train. This one is a historical fiction that takes place in 1938, and it follows a main character by the name of Lena. So she is trying to I think, kind of just figure out her place in the world, especially with having a parent that's so well known. She uses a wheelchair because she had polio, and so she's really interested in the magic of like the real world magic of like science, and she wants to explore that. And then things get more interesting when she meets this orphan who eventually becomes an apprentice to the illusionist. But then things get even more complicated when both the illusionist and the apprentice are arrested by Nazis and made to perform in this community that they have created for Jews. And it becomes a story of survival. I really enjoy adult historical fiction, and I haven't been reading as much as I wanted to read this year. So I was definitely looking forward to getting the opportunity to pick up and read this one. All right, y'all. As always, if you are interested, like I said, enjoying book of the month for the first time, remember you can use my code Bookishrealm, and I'll leave the link and everything down in the description box below. You can get your first book for $5. Be sure to check out Book of the Month. They're an awesome service. Really appreciate it. And they now do ship to Canada, which is a plus. It is great. They also have this amazing podcast, which I will link down in the description box as well, where they get the opportunity to interview authors, which I think is really fun and unique. You definitely should give it a listen. But as always, thank you Book of the Month for sponsoring this video. All right, y'all. So let's go ahead and jump into what I read in November. Like I said, I'm not doing the stats only. I'm kind of done with stats. Let's be honest here. I feel like I'm literally just done with stats at this point because I'm just tired from work and just everything in between. And so I'm like, you know, let's just talk about what I read. Let's just talk about the books. And so that's where we're at. We're just going to talk about the books. I am going to tell you what I read, including the graphic novels and comics and manga that I read. I'm not going to review any of that stuff. It won't be included in my best and my worst list, simply because of the fact that I do have a comic book channel, which is Realm of Comics, which I will link in the card symbol above. If you want to know more about that stuff, I should be getting a wrap up over on that channel probably by the end of this weekend sometime. So, but I will tell you exactly what I read. So let's go ahead and jump in, go through all the titles. First thing I read was I Survived, Hurricane Katrina 2005, Blood on the Tracks Volume 9, Earth Divers Issue Number 1, Earth Divers Issue Number 2, Poison Ivy Issue Number 1, Legends Black Panther, Real Account Volume 2, Zom 100 Volume 3, Batman and the Joker Deadly Duo Issue Number 1, Fuel the Fire, Night of the Mannequin, Ladies on Top Volume Number 1, Blood on the Tracks Volume Number 10, Blood on the Tracks Volume Number 11, Sweat and Soap Volume 5, Sweat and Soap Volume 6, The Apothecary Diaries Volume 1, Black Eyed Peas and Hoghead Cheese, Drawn Together, Just Ask, Kuruko's Basketball Volume 1, which is actually a bind up of the original Volume 1 and Volume 2, rammed by the reviews for this book. Which I will be talking about. Surviving the City Volume 1, Surviving the City Volume 2, The Princess and the Warrior, Namor the Submariner Issue Number 2, Fire in His Fingertips Volume 1, Fire in His Fingertips Volume 2, Fire in His Fingertips Volume 3, Wash Day Diaries, Kimchi Kimchi Every Day, Healer of the Water Monster, Look Back, Standing in the Need of Prayer, Yakuza Lover Volume 1, If I Could Reach You Volume 5, Fiance Chosen by the Ring Volume 1, Kowloon's Ball Parade Volume Number 1, Give Me Love, Cherish and Gratitude, Hold Them Close, Frizzy, Thank You Next, A Seed in the Sun, Land of the Cranes, Mihi Ever After, Futureland, Superworld, Save Noah, Killmonger Volume 1, Jojo McCoon's The Used to Be Best Friend, Jojo McCoon's Fancy Pants, and then Lock and Key Volumes 1 through 6. So that was a total of 56 books that I read. Most of this stuff actually, y'all, is graphic novels, comics, and manga. It just happened to be that type of month for me. December is kind of lending itself to be that type of month for me as well, except I've been doing a lot of audio booking, so that will make a difference. So to be honest with you, most of my disappointments this month definitely came from comics, graphic novels, and manga. So because I'm not going to be covering that here, we're just going to talk about the things that I really enjoyed, coming up with the top 5 of books that I read in November, which for me is a really good sign that I definitely felt the pressure of things going on in my personal life. Not bad, just holiday season is typically a busy time for me, and so I think this is why during the holiday season I often gravitate to comfort reading. So a lot of this was comfort reading and stuff that I knew that I was going to like. There's one book that I will say is a disappointment, so we're going to go ahead and we'll start off with that one. But for the most part, it was such a positive reading month, except for the, you know, 1 or 2 comics or graphic novels that I didn't enjoy. Like most of this stuff was literally like a 3.5 or higher. But for the disappointment, let's just go ahead, because I always like to start with a negative and with positive. Rammed by the reviews for this book, which is by Leonard Delaney, who apparently is infamous for creating these romance books that are pretty freaking off the wall. And we did this as a read aloud for Izzy's birthday. I will link the video in the card symbol, but you've got to listen to us narrate the book. Like, it is very fascinating and very interesting. Best time of my life. Now, was this book good? Absolutely not. It's a 2-star read. It literally is like a choose your own adventure type of situation. This woman goes, it's kind of like a writing retreat. So it's a hard time to describe what this book is. It's kind of like a writing retreat. And what the author did is literally pull reviews of the book from Amazon. Like, so they wrote a certain part of the book. They wrote the beginning of the book, and they allowed readers to dictate what would happen next based off of the reviews that they left on Amazon. So literally there are sections where it is a real Amazon review that someone has written, and then the author continues the story. The most bizarre thing I've ever read, it goes left, like literally rammed by the review. There was a part where like she was screwing eggs. It was weird. It was such a disgusting experience, but also a very fun experience between that and the weird animals that she was screwing. And it was a laugh and a good time, because we had no idea where the story was going, and we read this together as a group. You have to listen to us like read it, and it's probably, I would say, maybe a 30 to 40 minute read of us doing this. I would highly recommend checking it out so you can see how wild this entire book gets. But I gave that one 2 stars. I don't know if I would do another read aloud of it, but I would not actively attempt to read Leonard Delaney on my own without it being associated with like a group reading. It's just not my style. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump to the positives for the month. We had quite a few positives, and it's hard for me to decide and choose what were like some of the best books that I read, considering that some of my favorites for the month were definitely comics and manga and stuff. Definitely some of my favorites were comics and manga. But if I had to go with a top 5 for this month, I definitely would say that one of the picture books that I ended up reading this month, which was Black Eyed Peas and Hoghead Cheese. I am starting to document my picture book reading more. I know I've said I've wanted to do that in the past, and I haven't done a good job of that, but it's a good point of reference for me, especially when I need to do reader's advisory, I'm doing stuff for work. It's good for me to be able to refer to things that I've read with my reviews attached to them. But Black Eyed Peas and Hoghead Cheese is such a great picture book in terms of illustrations and just the story itself. It focuses on a young girl who is celebrating New Year's with her family, but she's with her grandmother while the rest of the family is staying elsewhere. And so her grandmother talks a lot about where food comes from in the Black community, like cultural practices as it relates to food. Like, why do we eat black eyed peas during New Year's? Why do we eat hoghead cheese? You know, why do we eat mustard greens? Like, what is the significance of these things? And it's tied to the history of slavery, and not in a negative way. I think that it's publishing is not doing the best job sometimes, I think, of finding that balance between trauma and joy, and understanding that both stories are important, but just heavily focusing on trauma. That's a whole different discussion. But my point is to say that it was a nice historical balance in the background where the grandmother would be in the kitchen kind of making certain things, whether that was a hog head cheese, whether that was a mustard greens, whether it was the black eyed peas, whatever it was. I think that the historical parts of it were amazing. Just teaching kids, you know, this is stuff that we had to use because we didn't have much else. Also countering the idea that Black people just don't eat healthy at all, or there's no healthy aspects of Black culture in terms of food, dietary, how can I put this? When we're exploring Black culture in terms of food and dietary choices, I think people often associate it with not being healthy, but there's this balance in the book where it does talk about like healthy food options and choices that were made both historically and in the present. And I really appreciated that, because sometimes that stereotype gets kind of like, you know, pushed, and there's a lot more in terms of systemic things that are going on as to why you have the Black community plagued with certain health issues. But once again, that's another discussion for another day. But I think for a children's picture book, if you're looking for a book that celebrates New Year's and is just full of so many historical pieces that are interesting, if you're into food, you're a foodie, food culture, particularly in the Black community, this is one that I would highly, highly recommend. I loved this picture book. I saw it today on the shelf and I was like, dang, like I want to pick that book up again. It was so good. The next one that I wanted to include, I hadn't read a beloved book in a very, very long time. And I was like, I need to try another one, because I hadn't picked up Beloved in a minute since I had been reading her, what is it called? The Mr. series. I hadn't been reading much of anything else from her. So I found out that she had a Thanksgiving novella called Give Me Love, Cherish, and Gratitude. And whew, y'all, this book is something else. It focuses literally the two characters, Cherish and Gratitude, who have a very rough start to the relationship. They actually get into a car accident. She causes the car accident, and it puts them in the position where they both are trying to get back home, and they can't get back home because the accident delayed them with their flights, and then it's like snow issues and all types of stuff. And so we follow them as they get to know each other more and try to figure out how they're going to get home and what the nature of their relationship is going to be. This is a very interesting look at grief and how grief impacts us. I don't know why, like, I've been surrounding myself with a lot of things lately that explore grief. It hasn't been intentional. And I did not know that this one was going to explore grief in the way that it did, but it does, because each of our characters are going through situations in which they have to reckon with grief and passing of family members, and it's very emotional, and it's more emotional than I think our characters even anticipated when they got involved with each other, because of the connection that they're able to make with one another. And it was gut-wrenching. For it to be a novella, I was very, very, and I shouldn't be surprised because Beloved is an excellent writer, but even then, like, just the character development and the plot and the themes explored was so intricately done for such a short book. It made me so emotional. I was very, very surprised. I literally laid on my couch when my parents were here visiting during Thanksgiving and read the book in one sitting, and was absolutely mind blown about how beautifully it was done, how well it was written, how just, I don't know, for me, I think sometimes books that have that emotional pull to them, really, for me personally, doesn't mean it's for everyone, really mark the signs of a gifted writer, in my opinion, because you're making me feel things that maybe I didn't anticipate feeling while reading this story. I mean, it's one thing to talk about grief, but to create a situation in which you feel the grief of the characters and the weight that's on their shoulders from carrying this burden of grief around with them for so long, and watching them figure out ways to release that, and not to become codependent, but to connect with each other in how they have lost their special individuals. Oh gosh, y'all, it was I can't even find the words. It was so good, but I definitely recommend checking that one out. Okay, so this next one I actually may be cheating just a little bit, and cheating in a way that's not necessarily like a bad thing, but I think that the audiobook of this one elevated my reading experience. I don't know if I would give it the same rating if I had read it physically, but reading it via audio, it was a heck of an experience. It was good. And that is Super World Save Noah. Y'all, if you're a superhero fan, even if you're not a superhero fan, or if you have little ones in your life that are fans of superheroes, if you have just, you're surrounded by kids, if you have a road trip that you're going on during this holiday season, or you're going to be spending some time in the car, please get this audiobook. I promise you the kids will enjoy it. It is about a young boy named Noah, where there's this weird, it's not cataclysmic per se, but it's this weird thing that happens where everyone around him gets superpowers except him. He is the only human that does not have superpowers. So it's weird because you have the superheroes and you have supervillains, and they're always looking for a reason to either like destroy something or save Noah. And so he's always caught in the crossfire of it all, and because he's the only one without superpowers, and his sister actually has two superpowers or super abilities. So he's low-key kind of pissed because he's like, you know what, actually, honestly, I feel like you got my superpower. That's how you ended up with two, which in the grand scheme of things is pretty funny. But there is this thing that begins to happen where someone is trying to ruin the lives of all the superheroes. And so it becomes up to Noah to kind of save the day, to help everyone out. And it ends in a heck of a cliffhanger, which I didn't realize that this was going to be a series. I'm hoping that it is going to be a series because that cliffhanger was just like something else. The audio. When I tell you the audio is a heck of an experience, it is a heck of an experience. I have not had an interactive audiobook like that in a very, very long time, where it literally felt like I was watching a superhero movie. Granted, a superhero movie that was, definitely designed for a younger age audience, but still the audiobook production and quality behind it was done very, very well. Now, not saying that I had some issues with the character development, but I think that this is definitely one of those books that's plot heavy and not so much character development. I felt like the characters could have been fleshed out a little bit more, but it is definitely plot driven. It's fast paced. It's a lot of action because of the fact that we're dealing with superheroes and supervillains. A lot of great fight scenes, a lot of need for people to save Noah, and then it kind of gets flipped on its head when Noah has to be the one, because he doesn't have superpowers, he's the only one that can save the day. It is very interesting to kind of look at it from the perspective of what does it mean to be a superhero, what makes someone more of a superhero than others, because there's some conflicts with like him having to deal with teams, like superhero teams. So it kind of looks at that dynamic too, which I thought was really, really interesting. And also relying on true friends, people that are always going to have your back. That's a huge thing. Friendship is a huge theme in this as well. I enjoyed it. And I really do think that the audiobook pushed it to a different level, because I think if I would have read this one physically, it probably would have been like a 3.5, but the audiobook pushed it up to a 4, y'all. It was great. I can see kids just loving this audiobook experience, and parents being entertained, or caregivers would be entertained by the audiobook, listening to it with kids. So, if you're into middle grade stuff, or if you, like I said, if you have little ones around you, this is one, like, please give it a chance and check it out. So I'm not going to cheat, but I'm going to say that I read 2 books by an author this past month, and they were both amazing. So the first one that I ended up reading was A Seed in the Sun, and then, I read The Land of Cranes first, and then I ended up reading A Seed in the Sun. And I don't want to cheat by saying like both of these, but they were both great reads, y'all. I just can't. I was going back and forth for a minute. I was like, which one do I choose? Because they were both so good, and they covered just 2 vastly different things that were extremely just heart-wrenching, but historically I learned a lot. So A Seed in the Sun focuses on migrant farm workers, and I don't know much about that entire community. I don't know much about the history behind that, but we're following a young girl and her family. They are working in terms of being on a farm, picking whatever the person who owns the land is growing. They're the ones who are responsible for picking all of the produce, and we follow them as they struggle to balance being able to make enough money and wanting to send their kids to school, their kids wanting to be kids but not really getting the opportunity to be kids because of the fact that they have to help, you know, get money. There's a lot that's covered in terms of like protesting and wanting fair wages. And I did not know that that was actually started by the Filipino community, which is very interesting. There are some terms using here, which the author does make a reference to. There are some terms in here that are dated, that are used intentionally to set a historical context and not used for shock value or to harm anyone. But these are terms that would have been used in this time period. There's actually a point in which Chavez does make an appearance on page because it does take place during that time. I just think that it's stories like this to me that are just so fascinating. It's written in verse and it's super accessible for kids. These are small parts of history that I often feel like are glossed over in secondary education. So whenever I find gems like this, I'm like, this is what kids need, especially with a lot that's going on with, oh, you know, we're not going to do critical race theory. And it's like, no, it's just history. History is history. Let's not even use that as an excuse to whitewash things that have happened in history. And so I think that whenever I find books like this, I hold on to them tight because even I, as an adult, I learned so much from them. And this is one that I just was attached to and glued to, and just hearing everything from her perspective, having to deal with her father's own internalized misogyny. I just like, her father just was like, you can't do this because you're a girl. You can't protest because you're a girl. You can't, you know, you can't do X, Y, and Z. And watching her having to battle with him, her and her siblings and her mother having to battle his misogynistic perspective while he's also dealing with overt racism. So it was just so many complex pieces and parts that to be oppressed doesn't mean that you can't oppress someone else or that you can't be bigoted or prejudiced against someone else. I'd say that because not everybody has the power to oppress, and I won't even get into the technicalities of that. But it's just to say, if you face bigotry and, you know, people who are being racist or misogynistic, doesn't mean that you also cannot participate in doing things. And that was such a clear thing with our father. Like, he was experiencing racism, but then he would come home and be misogynistic. And so many different pieces and parts of that one just worked so well for me. And I just could not get enough of that one. And I read that one after I ended up reading Land of Cranes, which I had that one on my TBR for a couple of years. I've been meaning to read it. I had a colleague who told me that and enjoy is such a difficult word here. It's not a word that I would use, but they were really shocked by the emotional experience that they had reading the book. And so I had added it to my TBR, finally got the opportunity to read it one day, and just as gut-wrenching as the other one, this one follows a young girl and her mother who are supposed to be actually helping her father. Her father gets picked up and is about to be deported, and she and her mother are supposed to be going to meet with her father, but they accidentally cross the border and they don't have the appropriate paperwork, because at that time they were meeting with a lawyer trying to apply for asylum, and something happened where they crossed the border and they weren't supposed to, and they didn't have the proper documentation and paperwork, and then it just goes left from there. So they end up getting sent to one of these, I mean, honestly, y'all, it's no different from an internment camp. And it's probably, people will probably be like, why are you using that term? But honestly, the conditions are no different from an internment camp, to be honest with you. So they're being held, they can't get in contact with the father, they can't get in contact with the lawyer. And basically the author chronicles the experiences of all of these individuals as they're living in this facility, the dire conditions that they're facing in terms of food, whether they're given appropriate clothing or they use the bathroom, the free time that they have, how they're treated by the staff that's there. And this is a reality. Once again, this is one of those narratives where it is written in a way that does not sugarcoat much of anything, but it's also very accessible for middle grade readers. This definitely has a lot of content warnings attached to it, I would think, for simply the conditions that they're living in, as well as a birth that's put in jeopardy because of the conditions. There is a assault of a character on page by someone who's working there, but it's all very relevant to the story. It didn't give the feel of like, oh, this is, unnecessary violence that's being targeted at a younger reading audience. It was very much so done in a way that gives kids a real life perspective of what happens at these places. So we just follow them as they're in this facility, and we follow our main character, who's a young girl, as she is trying to reckon with what exactly is going on. When is she going to get out? There is some discussion about her indigenous roots, which I really, really appreciated. And there's a little bit of connection with her artwork and her experiences and how she connects with the world at large, which it's a very good book. It was a lot more gut-wrenching than I anticipated, but definitely well worth a read. All right, so my last one that I am going to talk about is going to be a book that I really can't talk about that much, which is ironic, but I can't talk about it that much. And that's Fuel the Fire by Krista and Becca Ritchie, which I am currently making my way through the series. I can happily say that by the time that this video goes up, I'm finished with the series. I've read the entire Addicted and Calloway Sisters series, which also includes that 660-page epilogue, which is the beast that I'm making my way through right now. I did not realize, I knew when I read, I think it's Kiss the Flower. I think that's their first book with Connor and Rose. I knew that I really liked their couple dynamic, but Fuel the Fire, I really like Connor and Rose, and I needed to sit on it and really think about how, out of all of the couples, theirs is most interesting. And it's because Connor grew up not really experiencing love at all. His father was never involved, and his mother was very cold and calculated. And so his romance with Rose is so important to me because, for personal reasons, not that Connor and I have anything 100% in common, but the idea of being able to still give love when you've never received it. And Connor, whenever it's his turn in terms of narrative, he always talks about how he expected to end up alone. He did not expect to be able to love or feel anything for anyone, and he met Rose. And this is the time in which we get to see their relationship develop more, where things are happening. And the dynamic between these two is just, it's so powerful. They're two very powerful humans, and their love is just so explosive that out of everyone, those two, that's my power couple. I also think that what I admired most about this one, I can't really tell you what it's about. I can't go into detail because of the fact that it is literally almost the end of the series. I think after Fuel the Fire, there's a final Daisy and Reich book, which that was an emotional roller coaster, but I'll talk about that one at the beginning of January. But that's the last book that we get in the Calloway Sister series before the epilogue. So there's a lot that's covered in this one. It's a pretty hefty book. I think it's 500 plus pages. We get to see how they are like Mama and Papa Bear over Lauren and Reich and Daisy and Lily. They are the oldest outside of Poppy and her husband, but we only see Poppy and her husband, which is the Calloway sisters, oldest sister. We only get to see her and her husband in glimpses, but in this one, we really are focused on these two kind of being the protectors over the four of them. And it's beautiful because you don't realize, and they don't realize, how much the two of them put their entire livelihoods on the line to protect so many individuals. And it's very calculated of them. It's very organized, and they do it very intentionally, but they're doing it so they can protect them and shield them from the media. Because at this point, they're extremely famous. There's a lot of media involvement. There we see the appearance of Scott. Oh my gosh, I hate that man. If you've read the series, you know who I'm talking about. So you see a lot of things that Connor is having to do and Rose is having to do to protect their family. And they may come off to a lot of people as cold and calculated, but their romance is so warm. Their passion and love that they have, not just for the family that they will create, but their extended family with these other two couples, is just, it's through every single page. And that's why, like, they are my power couple. They may have this outward appearance of not being, you know, the warmest people or the most loving people, but they love hard. They love hard. They love each other hard, and they love their family really, really hard. So I'm so happy that I'm coming to the end of this series, because it's been a long time coming in terms of me like reading the series. But let me tell you, it's been a good journey, and I'm excited to delve into the spinoffs, which is the spinoffs. I can't tell you what the spinoffs are about because it'll spoil what the series is about. So anyway, I'm just excited to jump into the spinoffs, which is like, I think we're up to 13 books in the spinoff. So I have a lot more to read in following this entire family, per se. All right, y'all, so that is it. Those are the books that I enjoyed, top 5 books, whatever the case may be. The one book that I was like, but it was overall, it was just a really good reading month, very positive reading month. As always, let me know in the comments below, what were your best books of November? What were your worst books of November? If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content from me, click the subscribe button, hit the bell for notification. Interested in supporting the channel or follow me on social media, all the links will be down in the description box below. And I'll be back with another video soon.